I came from the mud. There's dirt on my hands.
Welcome to Build an Iconic Life podcast. I'm your host, Chris Whitehead, and this podcast is dedicated to help you build a life with zero regrets by focusing on how you have everything you need to stand up, stand out, and live life on your terms. Let's dive right in. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Build an Iconic Life. I'm here with Victoria Pelletier, and she has a company called Unstoppable You. More importantly, she has one hell of a story of overcoming and really blending in all the things that we like to talk about inside of Iconic. So without further ado, by the way, everybody, we've only had like 4 opportunities to do a podcast together, and either something crashes, something leaks in a roof, things have happened. So I've had the opportunity in the meantime to get to know Victoria a little bit better. She did a TEDx talk. It was TEDx Miami. Is that right?
That's right.
And it has about 60,000 views on it. You can check it out on YouTube. I highly recommend it because she talks about resilience. And I'm actually really, really excited for this recording to make its way all the way to being published. Victoria, welcome to the show again.
Thank you so much. I'm glad it's working out and we're here today.
Yeah, me too. So one of the things that you talked about in your TEDx talk was you really starting out of the block with struggles. And the mindset that you carried around it. I would really like you to share with the audience a little bit. What were some of those struggles? You can just hit the highlights, and then what those things started teaching you. And then overarching theme is, as you move through life, how you became a phenomenal consultant, a speaker on stages in front of thousands of people. You've written 3 books. You have helped companies scale and grow. You've done everything. And along the way, you've probably learned a lot and made a few mistakes. But it all began with you as a young person, right?
Yes. Yeah. I attribute both biology and the circumstance to being a significant part of my drive, my why, to sort of quote from Simon Sinek. And so I'll share. I do hope the listeners go and watch the TEDx. And I am proud to say it only came out like maybe a month ago. I actually think I'm up to like 75,000 views. Now the goal is to get it to 1 million, but
Sure.
But I do share why I'm uniquely qualified when I talk about resilience. So I encourage people to watch it. However, I will share that. So I'm born to a drug addicted teenage mother who is like exceptionally abusive to me. I was in and out of the child welfare system. And then thankfully, one of the most selfless things she could ever do was agree to give me up for adoption. I was adopted into, a family by a couple. My mom in particular, extremely loving woman, did so much for this like broken young girl, but lower socioeconomic position. And so my mom, I remember she told me, and for me, my mom is the woman that raised me, not the one that gave birth to me.
Sure.
And she said to me, I think when I was 10 or 11 years old, she was like, Tori, you need to do better than us. And when she said that, she meant by like my education and vocationally. My dad was a school janitor. My mom was a secretary. But I don't think, Chris, that she had to say those for me, because the why was so strongly formulated already at that point that I was determined to be better than the biology of the family that I was born into and the circumstances, both with my biological mother and those I experienced, with my adoptive family and beyond.
Why do you think that some people choose to accelerate and overcome, and some people go the other direction?
I do believe it's a choice. So that was a good, very much the word that you use is one I use frequently. I don't think you can't control all of the challenge or adversity or trauma necessarily that might come your way, but it's always a choice in terms of how you're going to react or respond to it. And some people choose to take, I'm not going to say the easier path, but it's a hard path to go the other way. It's easier to blame other people for what's happened in the circumstance than put in the work and work on a whole bunch of fronts. I'm not just talking about the work of education or what I'm talking about, the work in self in terms of how you overcome, the adversity, what kind of like mental mindset you can get, how the building the muscle of resilience is, if you will.
So you were saying, and thank you for that, because I do believe it's a choice. And I also believe that you choose your hard.
Yes.
If you choose to do what we call sweat in peacetime, maybe you don't bleed in wartime, but either choice has its hard. I just personally had the opportunity to see so my parents got divorced really young, and one side tended to thrive financially and lived more towards urban area, and one lived more in the country. And I got the benefit of both. There's not one better than the other, but there was an itch that I couldn't scratch, that I said, hey, I want to live a better lifestyle. So I chose my hard. And what I also didn't realize I was choosing was I had a terrible mindset around money, around the belief of what I deserved. And I found the harder I worked, the more I stayed exactly the same. And so I realized I was the problem. But anyway, I digress. So you chose, and your mom said, hey, be better than us. And so you had already made that choice because you weren't going to submit yourself to a lifetime of pain and misery that you had experienced from birth, basically. And so what happened after that?
Well, so I started working at age 11. I never had to. My parents, like I said, lower socioeconomic status, but I never had food insecurity. We always had a roof over our head, but there was no money for extras at all. And so if I wanted to be like, and I did desire a little bit more, as maybe even sometimes at this age, like to be like, to have some of these other things, I had to work for it. So I started working at age 11. I'm sure child labor laws would not allow that anymore. I worked in a hair salon doing everything except for the actual hair activities, sweeping
Probably
and
good for
cleaning
everyone.
and cash. Yeah, for sure. And then by 14, I was my first leadership role. I became the assistant manager of the shoe store that I worked at while I was in high school. Held multiple jobs. So I've always had multiple jobs or side hustles. I bought my first company at 20. So it was just a consistent drive to have money because my parents declared bankruptcy twice in their lifetime.
Wow.
And once was when I was living at home with them. And I saw that and the paycheck to paycheck, and I never wanted that. And so I started working at a very early age. I was fortunate. And sometimes I wonder when I think of the biology of where I came from, I received some brains somewhere, although I do know a couple of my biological aunts are very, very intelligent and have some pretty awesome jobs. So I was gifted in school. So I ended up skipping a couple grades. And so, I was fortunate on that front. Went off to university really young. And I worked at a bank while I was in university and got promoted through the ranks there. Thought I was going to go to law school, but they offered me a big promotion and a bigger leadership role. And I took it, and I realized, and this was another thing for me, I follow like passion and the stuff that I enjoy doing and what brings me joy. So I never went to law school. I've stayed in the business world ever since. And by 24, I got recruited out of the banking environment where I was running large scale contact center operations for my first executive role. I became the chief operating officer and general manager for a 6,000 person global outsourcing company. And that was my foray into the world of B2B professional services, where I have stayed ever since.
Tell me about the pressure of being 24 years old and being in charge of 6,000 people.
It was stressful all around. We didn't have the vernacular to call it imposter syndrome. I don't think back then. I don't know when that phrase is risen to into society, but that's probably a good way to say it like that. I certainly felt that. So I was the only woman. I was the youngest by 2 decades. And I happened to be part of the LGBT community. I'm married to a man now, but I was married to my wife at that point. I met her when I was 22 years old. I was also a brand new mother. I gave birth to my first child 3 months before I accepted that role. So I was leaving what I was a relatively secure. We know there's no such thing really as job security, but a large bank that I'd worked in for a number of years, to step into a role where instead of just leading operations, I was leading all functions of the organization except for finance. So what I will say, I put a mask on. I'm not a fan of fake it till you make it, except for one thing, and that's confidence. I think that
Mhm.
helped me get the job. Confidence for many people is equated to competence. And so
Mhm.
so that mask I'm fine with wearing, but there's one I wore that a few years later came to bite me in the ass from a leadership perspective. In that when I showed up there, I didn't want anyone to question why I had my seat at the table. I lied about my age in the opposite direction. What woman makes herself older? But I did that to like mask and to cover. I never told so openly the story of my childhood. I didn't want to create vulnerability. I didn't want anyone to pity me. I was a little embarrassed by it. And I also never showed significant emotion because I didn't want people to think I was soft and weak as this young female leader. And so I got a nickname. I found out, I think I was probably about, wasn't until I was about 28, but I found 27, 28, I found out that my nickname was the Iron Maiden. Uh, Now I'm very good at leading solid business performance, but that's not the kind of leader I would want to work for and follow. So for me, I showed up because that's actually what I saw, the command and control, what I saw on my own work experience, what I saw on television. So I was emulating that. But it truly wasn't who I was. So it was tough stepping into that. But I also learned early on, you got to lean on amazing, amazing team around you that come with like the diversity of skill and experience that you don't have.
That took me. So I became an entrepreneur at 24.
Hmm.
I quit corporate, and I was married at the time. And she asked me, well, "Why don't you just stay part time or something so you can keep insurance?" And I said, "It's too late. I've already quit." And I didn't decide to become an entrepreneur in anything that I knew, because why would I do that? And I had massive imposter syndrome for quite a long time. And I relate to so much of what you're saying, because in order to even sell a job, I had to display a certain kind of confidence about something that I had never done before. But the one thing that I knew inside of me is that I would figure it out. And I also knew that I would stick with it, even if it took a lot longer than I said it was supposed to. Because we know all about contractors, don't we? But that's when the more vulnerable side of me would come out, and I would tell people I'm sorry, and then we would take the time as a team and figure the problem out and make it better. It didn't create profit, but it did create an opportunity for me to choose me. And that's all I keep hearing in everything that you're saying, because I understand, and especially as a woman, coming up through the ranks, at the age that you're doing it, like, you're already going to be viewed and judged in a way that men are not. And for you to maintain the confidence, number one, I'm impressed by. More importantly, for you not to crack under pressure is what really, really, I think, is something that is worth exploring. And that's a little bit about what your TEDx talk was about, this resilient part of you. And I think some of the most beautiful people on earth are people that have gone through horrific things, and what they've chosen to do is turn lemons into lemonade. And so as you started to have this massive success, what came next?
I Actually, I will tell you my definition of success has
Okay.
changed. So for me, I grew up watching, my mom would have me watch a couple of TV shows with her. One was Dallas and the other was LA Law. And so I think LA Law was part of where, my desire to be a lawyer came from.
Sure.
But also just seeing in their success, it was very much wealth and power and status. And so for me, I climbed to achieve higher and higher. So climbing the corporate ladder meant I had more power. And I'll say that in air quotes, because I do think everyone's a leader in their own right, whether you have a team, regardless of the
Mhm.
hierarchy. But I viewed that as greater success. And with that did, however, come more money. And so I kept getting bigger and bigger houses and stuff to show the world, what I'd achieved. And so that was a big part of my success. There was a few things that shifted for me. My ex-wife actually had cancer her first time when I was 7 weeks pregnant with our second child. So that was so
Mhm.
going through pregnancy as she went through chemo, and like just that experience, number one, It was around the time I heard of my Iron Maiden, because I gave birth to my second one at 28. Um, and um, and just sort of shifting my lens on what was important to me. That's when things changed in terms of how I viewed success. And so I had achieved what I said I wanted as a child in terms of overcoming. But then it shifted to, health as our wealth for sure. But also the shift from in my leadership journey and in the investment I wanted to make in people and therefore doing things that bring personal or professional joy or value and stop doing the things that don't.
What do you think the mechanism, the trigger to switch that? I know hearing like the Iron Maiden, probably having children, probably seeing your wife go through something so horrific, probably brought you into, hey, we're all going to die. But what was the straw that broke the camel's back for you that just said, no, I'm going to define me in a different way?
There isn't one thing. That there was so much that happened in a short period of time. So pregnant, wife diagnosed with cancer. My mother and my biological mother passed away within 3 months of one another when I was pregnant with that youngest child as well. Like, so I just had this cacophony of things around me that said, like, what's important here? So, okay, I've got this great big house, the stuff that comes with it, but really what's important for me. So it was all of those things, but they all came within a year of one another. The nickname at work, the, cancer of my wife, the death of, although I wasn't and really speaking to my biological mother, her passing and my mom's passing and, so close to one another, all of it. I was just like, so that just really caused me to reevaluate things. And it's continued ever since. I feel like from there was a period a few years later where I made some bold moves for me, to continue down the path of doing things that bring me joy and value. And I made some hard decisions, one of which was deciding to leave my wife, which was a difficult decision as well. And finding out 3 months after I separated from her cancer came back. So there's, so I've continued to like evaluate what's really important, and creating boundaries, therefore, of saying no to things or delegating or outsourcing the things that still need to get done, but they're not creating joy or value for me.
What are some of the first things that you did when you? So first was awareness, right? Like, I don't want to be this way anymore.
Right.
Did you immediately start taking action, or did you immediately start making plans?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah. So there were things I could immediately take action around. And so everything from one was really small, and this is how I showed up from a leadership perspective. But some things weren't natural or comfortable for me. So the fact that I was all business all the time, I just made an immediate plan, intention that I would start meetings, not diving right into the agenda. And that time to like socialize and engage with people. But taking 5 or 10 minutes to like do that stuff was, again, not what I did. Now it's so innate. Like, I'm talking to strangers on elevators. Like, it's just who I am now. So there were things where I immediately did that. But then there were others. There was a plan that I had to make to improve who I was. So there was a lot of self-reflection I needed to do. Although I started to gain much more confidence, real confidence in my abilities as an executive leader, there was still so much I was insecure about. And I sought positive affirmation externally because I don't think I still wasn't in a position to truly love myself. And I don't think I'd fully processed, again, some of the trauma. The fact that I had been beaten or abused and rejected by my biological mother sat with me for so long. I always thought, I'm not good enough. And that caused me to make decisions. So there wasn't immediate action, but I built a plan on how am I going to work through that, to come out the other side and again, focus on the things that, have greater meaning.
I don't know if you relate to this at all, but I was so driven that I didn't take a lot of time to plan. I took a lot of time to take a lot of action. And when I hit a certain threshold of personal development, self-awareness really started. Well, also just age for guys, like, if you go out on a date, just don't talk about yourself the whole time, kind of awareness, you know what and so that was in general happening to me. And it was the first time that I realized I was pushing on pull doors so much that I could just sit down and observe my thoughts and really start to have more and more awareness about myself and realize what the triggers and the drives are. And I think a lot of people in today's world, especially with the advent of social media and the videos, 7 seconds and flip Instagram and all this stuff, a lot of us don't have a strong enough muscle to be able to sit still long enough to have an original thought versus a thought that's being fed to us. And I think that's what we as coaches get to help people do, is say, what I hear you saying is, and they're like, that's not what I'm saying at all. It's like, well, those are the exact words you're using. And I was in that spot as well. And I realized all I was doing was recreating a narrative. No matter where I did it, no matter what state I lived in, no matter what job I had, it was the same experience over and over again, even with different people. And you talked about making some bold moves. Are you willing to share what some of the bold moves were?
Yeah, I've well, a really big one for me was I think one of the more difficult decisions in my life was choosing to separate from my ex-wife. We had
Sure.
been together for 11 years, and she was my best friend, but it was no longer your lover, partner, the romantic. But I was choosing to break up a family, and I felt selfish for doing that. It took me 2 years to do it for that reason. So that was one for me, but it was a step, towards me trying to find the kind of fulfillment and at some point then find the kind of relationship that I was seeking.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be one. I've made some that were, I hate people who ask me, how do you have or do it all between wife, mother, kids, executive career, speaking, sitting on boards. I work out 6 days a week, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, stop. It's all just life for me, but it comes with compromise and trade-offs at certain times.
Sure.
So when my ex-wife passed away 4 years after we separated from her second bout of cancer, I had a job I loved. I'd only been in it for a little over a year, um, but I traveled 75% of the time. And now as a single parent, she used to watch the kids when I traveled. There came a time and I tried to find a different role with that company. But given my seniority and some of the things that were going around, it didn't happen. So I quit and I took a different role. In my hometown. Wasn't going to move the kids to, where the job was based, that had much less responsibility than I'd had previously, but limited travel. So that was, the choice to do the right thing for my family. And then there was a number of years ago, I made a decision. I was really not happy. I was in an extremely well-paying role. And at some point, that company told me when I expressed my discontent that I was recruited for something, and then they changed the game on me when I came in, and I didn't love some of the things they were asking, and I was basically told that I should just be happy given the amount that I earned. And I was like, like, I strive for the 80-20 rule. Like 80% of the time I got to get up and be excited about going into work. There's always going to be 20% of either some jerks you don't want to work with or administrative stuff that just has to get done.
Sure.
And so I made a really, bold move a couple of years ago and said, this is not it, and I'm out. And so it took, some time and, just did, it work independently to figure out what was going to be that right next step for me. So I've done things like those are some examples. There's others, but that's a bit of a mix between like sort of personal and professional, some of the big ones that I've done.
And that doesn't hit everybody the same way, but when you're as driven as you are and have always been to be successful in the conventional manner, and from the traumatic experience that you had that probably propelled a lot of that, which, by the way, I'm the president of that as well. It's a very bold move and counterintuitive to not choose the money, to instead choose harmony and peace and you know, higher power, God, universe, whatever you want to say, where you're being led. And what I see it as is maturity and wisdom. And the beautiful thing is sometimes before that ship really starts to sail, it goes through a lot of tumultuous sea work. And that's almost what I always consider the challenge. The challenge is, so you make the decision to do the right thing, and then all hell breaks loose. All because it wants to get, you know, the something wants to get you to go back. And what I consider it usually is ego, is trying hard for survival. Because that's all it's there for. It's like, I don't want to change much because I just want to keep you alive. And what I found is, if you do the thing long enough, eventually the ego submits and it says, we're going to be okay. And now you can start using your unconscious mind, because that's working all the time. It works a lot smarter than your conscious mind. And you've been talking about it. You started trusting your gut. And as you started doing those things, what I find, and this is what's so beautiful about being an entrepreneur, so beautiful about life in general, whether somebody has a job or not, opportunities just start showing up almost as if they were designed for you. And what I truly believe is, because you're in alignment, those opportunities start appearing that were always there for you, but you're now ready for them. Do you have anything to say about that?
So I'm not a spiritual or religious person. Yet there's something, I don't know what it is, energy, whatever, that I do, you know, kind of believe
it all is energy.
And I'm not a fatalist in that either, in that I believe things are predestined, period. Again, going back to our very beginning of our conversation, we have choice.
Yes.
However, I have learned to be strategically intentional and be comfortable with going with the flow and trusting my gut sometimes. And it's generally like proven me like well in doing that. Only a couple of times it hasn't, but I live a life of no regret, and I feel like it's all a learning. And so it taught me something when, you know, that gut or that choice didn't turn out as expected.
You know, not everybody will appreciate this, but we actually now host weekly meetings where we talk about the law of vibration, the law of manifestation. And the truth is if you boil everything down, everything is just energy. It's just a frequency. Everything. We're not solid. You literally can poke holes through this thing if you wanted to. And all I was speaking about with the unconscious mind is, when we vibrate at a certain frequency, the things that are already on that frequency are magnetically attracted to it. And so you don't have to be spiritual, you don't have to be religious, you don't have to be any of that. But if we can agree that everything is mere energy and that things vibrate at different frequencies, if you just figure out the frequency of the thing that it is that you want and actually believe in it, that's the key. You can't just, I hope. You have to be willing to say, I will not quit. I will move forward. I will make it happen. The story is kind of written for you. So it's not predestined, but it is not, I mean, I'm sure you can attest to this. Is this the story you thought you would be living? Is it the way you thought you would be living it? Or is it an adventure almost every day now?
It's an adventure. I think of, you know, we're recording this and I'm sitting in Miami. I never thought I would move from Miami. Like, I'm born in Canada, but New York is where I've spent a lot of years living and working.
Yeah.
And I love it. And I came here on vacation, thought I was buying a winter place, and fell in love with the house. And here I am full-time 3.5 years later. And I'm kind of like that a little bit, even on career journeys, on like travel experiences. And so again, I am a planner. I use the phrase strategic intentionality frequently. You know, I develop a strategy and I build plan and action with intention. Yet you never know where where it's going to unfold. You know, we had some friends whose birthday, and they took us to a drag brunch on Sunday, and then who know where it went from there, and in a pool party, I'm like, and it was like this super cool, like fun day that was not really super planned.
It's the best. So during COVID, Rob and I hop on a plane and we're flying to Tampa because we're going to the west side of Florida. And she goes, "Hey, hon, where are we staying?" I said, "I don't know. You need to pick it while we're on the plane." And she freaked out because she's a super planner. I, on the other hand, I can be very spontaneous. I'm very comfortable with the spontaneity. Like it always, I'm going to land on my feet. That has not always worked out well for me, but it has worked out better than it hasn't most of my life. And what's funny is the more spontaneous she has become, the more of a planner I have become. And I see the benefit in both, but I love the idea of launch it. I love the idea of grow wings on the way down. I love the idea that action is better than perfection. And finishing something is also better than stewing over it for a long period of time. Because the one thing I know that we all are losing right now is our time here on earth. And I've been very aware of that for a very long time, and I want to make the most of it. And it's all it sounds like you've been doing. You becoming more and more. You stop trusting in the corporate system to get you there, and you started trusting in yourself. And I think that's what you always did. But these powers that be tried to mold you into something, and you finally said, "You can go." That, well, I was going to say something really rude. I won't say that, but I'm trying to tame it. You know, my COO says it's okay to cuss, but sometimes I'm like, fine. Because she goes, I have to edit it out. Anyway, but you would not allow people to define you. That's the biggest thing about you that is beautiful. And I see that a little bit is the empire versus the rebellion in Star Wars. I don't know if you're a Star Wars fan. You're certainly of that genre. But you kind of went down this road for a while and said, "Oh, I can have massive success here, but is it fulfilling my soul?" And what I've seen you turn into is somebody with vulnerability, authenticity, and the ability to take all of this strategic stuff that you've done and now deliver it to people with impact. That's a really beautiful thing, because you've written 3 books, right? You co-wrote one and you have 2 of your own.
That's
Why
right.
don't you tell everybody what your books are?
So the first one is called Unstoppable, and the publishers approached me to contribute a chapter to the book. And I live an unstoppable life. That is my mantra. I sign majority of my social media posts with one of 2, if not both hashtags. One is unstoppable. And actually my business name is Unstoppable You. And the other is no excuses, going back to like choice and mindset. And so it felt very serendipitous to contribute to that one. And that was the first time I put pen to paper on sharing my story. I'd shared it on some stages and in smaller settings. So that was that one. And then when I left my last employer about 1.5 years ago, I actually the one where I said I sort of made a bold move in leaving.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I had a job to go to. I had a verbal offer, but before it got papered, the CEO got fired from the board. So I'm like, oh well, shit. Sorry, your editor. Take that one out. But
No,
I
that's
was like,
good.
okay, so I have time and capacity, and I'll have to look for a job. But what I'm gonna, and I knew I wanted to write a book, my own. What I didn't expect was how much I was biting off when I decided to do 2 within the same year. So the first one is called Influence Unleashed, and it's on personal branding, something that is very important to me. It's an element I contribute some of my career success to, and I just see people doing it so poorly. So I wrote that one. And then another one, the one that it just came out actually a couple of weeks ago, called The Power of Whole Human Leadership. And it's some of what we're talking about. It's vulnerability, it's authenticity, it's empathy as a leader. That doesn't come with a trade-off for strong performance, but it's being that different kind of leader. And so I wrote those 2 this year, and it's been an amazing journey. I'm proud to say they both hit #1 bestseller status, maybe only for a few days at some point, but that's great. I'm going to own it. I'm going to claim it.
Yeah, I've co-authored 3 books, and I've written one, and like you, it went to #1, and it was like, woo, and then nothing else happened. But hey, only 1% of the population has ever written a book. I'm sure even less have gone to #1 status. So it's a cool achievement, but more importantly for me, well, #1, it's one hell of a business card to give away to people. #2, it memorializes the thoughts that I had at the time and the cumulative experience of all the challenges that I put on myself, same as you. And #3, it's, if it ever gets really, really cold, we can use it to start a fire. but no, I encourage other people to do the same. We're living in a world where, we have more hive mentality than we've ever had. We have more ability to connect than we've ever had ability to connect. And unless people share authentically and vulnerably and have different viewpoints and are not doing what we're doing in the US, which is deciding to divide, we should actually accept the fact that somebody might not believe exactly what I believe, and we don't have to murder them for it. But we'll overcome that too, I hope. But this is how we can grow and evolve in a much, much faster rate. Because I know that as a 24-year-old guy, 25, 26, 27, I'm trying to do things in construction. And the only information that I have is to go to Lowe's and buy a Black & Decker book after I've sold a job. So I'm like, how do I build this thing? I don't know. And there was no YouTube. There were no encyclopedias that I could find. There was nothing. And there were no mentors that I could find either back then. So I love talking to people that have done amazing things, that have taken the time to write books, that have taken the time to go up the corporate ladder just about as high as you can go, that now you're speaking on stages, you're empathetically helping other people overcome, because I bet you can see the challenges that they've gone through because you've been through them yourself and you found a way to find both sides of the coin. And I want to ask you a question, if you would consider it, and we can cut it out if you don't want to do it. Would you ever be willing to come back on and actually, because we need to end this one, would you ever be willing to come back on and talk about the 4 principles of branding?
Yeah, absolutely. Love it.
And some of these laws of empathetic leadership. And what we'll do, I'll make sure I get both your books, and I'll make sure that that I can ask you some really smart questions through that process. Because one of the biggest mistakes I made as a business owner for years, Tori, I didn't understand marketing, and I was too afraid to spend money on it because it's like you're giving it away and it goes poof, and you're like, that took me a month to make, and I don't know what to do. So, but it really hamstrung me as a business owner for so many years until I learned how to do it effectively. And I don't think it's nearly as hard and mysterious as people make it out to be, but there's a way to do it that actually sets you up for success. And then there's a way to do it that makes you look like you're in a red ocean with everyone else, Yeah. And I think that's probably what you talk about, is how to truly brand you. Yes. So cool. I would love the fact that you come back on. Now, if people want to, and thank you, by the way, for coming on the show today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Of course. If people wanted to get in touch with you, if they want to talk about coaching, if they wanted to inquire about any of the services, what would be the best way for them to reach out to you?
The one-stop shop is my website, which is victoria-pelletier.com. And I'm sure you'll have that in your show notes.
Yes.
So they don't need to look up how to spell that. And there they can learn about keynotes and coaching and things that I provide. But it also has the links to connect with me on the other platforms where people would want to follow me, like LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook.
Okay, great. Any parting words?
I have a favorite quote that connects to some of what we talked about. And it's by George Adair. And it says, everything that you've ever wanted lives on the other side of fear. And so I got this really cool picture and have that quote. And so, for me that, when you think about mindset, and I just think for me, that means you need to step into the discomfort, and it's in that place, that's where magic happens. That's where growth and opportunity comes.
Hey, everybody. You've just been listening to Victoria Pelletier, and I'm telling you, she's on fire. Connect to her. We'll make sure that we put her website in our show notes. And if you need to connect with her and you don't know how, certainly reach out to me. We'll see you in the trenches. Take care.
I came from the mud. There's dirt on my hands. Strong like a tree. There's roots where I stand.
Hey, friend, if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, please leave a review and subscribe to catch future casts. If you really enjoyed this episode, make sure you share it so others can benefit from it as well. I'll see you in the trenches.
Try to catch me howling at the moon.